Welcome inside Black and Gold. We are here, a Super Bowl edition, day one, sitting on Radio Row. Excited to be a part of the action here for Super Bowl 59. Eagles and Chiefs will be kicking off on Sunday. We'll be having all kinds of stuff for you leading up to the madness, especially Jeff will be in action tonight at opening night in the Caesars Superdome where both teams take the podium. And definitely interested to see, obviously, one guy in particular with Kellen Moore, Eagles offensive coordinator, the questions he gets today at media night.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to just hear the questions and how much of them are New Orleans based and how much of them he has to sidestep. I do want to talk about Kellen extensively in the second segment. So I just want to talk about Super Bowl here, what we're doing. We didn't do a second episode last week because I figured we're going to post several episodes throughout the week. We're going to be sitting here all week on Radio Row. We already had an interview with Jason Fitz at Yahoo Sports. We're going to have Brian Brzee later in the week. We're trying to nail down a few other Saints players because it's going to be a bunch of stuff going on. And so, we'll talk about that. We'll post some one-offs on YouTube. I'm going to host with you on Friday, WWL 4 to 8, and you're going to be hosting every day this week. You can see kind of behind us, that's our WWL setup. So it's a whole thing, right? And we even have a mixer. This is the first time we have had a mixer for this podcast. We've been doing it for 3 years.
Moving on up, folks.
Don't get used to it because they're not going to let us. They're not going to let us. They're not going to let us keep this. But speaking of mixers, if the Saints were like a drink mix, mm-hmm. They've been kind of now interspersed all throughout the NFL cosmetology. That's a bad metaphor, and I'm going to stop using it. But most of it's ended up in Seattle.
Right.
If you've been paying attention, Clint Kubiak, Andrew Janocko, John Benton, all with the Seahawks. You're going to watch Seahawks games next year and you're going to be like, those plays look familiar because they're going to run the Saints offense.
Kubiak pulled up, who's coming with me?
Yeah, and they were right. They were right because as we know now, as we sit here, no one has a job, right? No. We haven't recorded a podcast since last week, so I guess I can go through some of the stuff we got at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
I was able to talk to a few Saints assistants out there, Jari Evans, Adam Gristick, who's an assistant linebackers coach. Michael Hodges is actually in Cincinnati now, so it's like, what am I going to do? Kevin Petrie was out there. None of these guys have any idea whether they're going to have jobs in 3 weeks, and it's really kind of fascinating because it's like they're out there wearing Saints shirts, right? Like they are Saints coaches,
right?
It's like I am still under contract, but 2 weeks from now, it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So yeah, it's a really weird time, and it's frustrating to know that we're still sitting here on February 3rd. The year-long month of January has gone by, and there's still not a head coach for the Saints. Just the news you're getting out of Saints camp these days is not anything that's you even want to bring up in a head coaching interview. So it's hard to look at this team and see it heading in the right direction right now. That'll all change immediately when you hire a head coach because it'll all be like, okay, what's the next steps from there? But man. I'm just tired of talking about this.
Well, the unfortunate thing is you can't get anything solidified with the guy coaching in the Super Bowl until after the game is over. So the earliest we can possibly expect the news to drop about, Kellen Moore would be on Monday.
Yeah, and we'll see how that goes and whether the
Saints from today,
whether the Saints get accused of tampering. But
yeah,
I think a bigger question even to me is like, okay, what does this roster look like?
Yep.
Like you look at guys like Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, DeMario Davis.
You throw Derek Carr in there too, I guess.
Well, Derek Carr is a whole different equation. Yeah. Derek Carr is like, okay, who wants this guy? And he's got a no trade clause. And
it was odd he moved back to California.
I don't know how odd that is. Like Michael Thomas always lived in Malibu. Like,
yeah,
it's not like he lived here his whole life.
Well, things ended well with Mike Thomas too.
They built a house out there. So I don't know. I think people, see, Drew Brees doesn't live here. Drew Brees always had a house, and he lives in California. His family lives in California.
But he still has a place here.
Sure, but he played here for 15 years, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. And if I'm Derek Carr, what exactly is drawing me to this area? I'm like, I love it here. Everyone's so nice. No, he says that. I don't think he means it. But it is what it is.
So another no Mardi Gras for Derek and family.
We'll see. We'll see if he might end up on a float or two. Crew de Vue's coming up. Maybe they'll take
right there.
Maybe they'll lob some friendly grenades his way, or maybe not so friendly.
Throw
grenades.
some mascara at the float.
Yeah, man. I don't know. All I know is it's Super Bowl week, and this is fun. This is cool. You can't really see it. I hope everyone takes advantage of the Super Bowl experience here in New Orleans. A lot of Eagles. Zack Baun posted on his Instagram story this morning. There's if you've ever seen the Saints locker room, there are these murals of Saints players. Cam Jordan's on one of them. Ryan Ramchek's on one of them. I think Will Smith is in there. Zach Strief. No, there's a few. I mean, obviously Drew is on one of them, but they've covered them up with Eagles players. And one of those Eagles players is number 53. It's Zack Baun. So he walked into the Saints locker room this morning because the Saints are using, I'm sorry, the Eagles are using the Saints locker room.
Right.
The Chiefs are using Tulane. Apparently the Eagles are the home team. And so that's what they get kind of first dibs, and they pick the Saints facility. But yeah, Zack Baun walks into his former locker room and he sees a giant mural of himself on the wall where he was never destined to end up.
Yeah.
It's just kind of it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. CJ Gardner-Johnson's in there too. I'm sure he's tearing down all the posters and stuff.
Yeah, quite a few, NOLA Philly connections.
Yes, but not any NOLA Kansas City connections.
No,
so, at least
except Spagnuolo.
At least not going that direction. Yeah, I guess that's Spags. That's a good point. We kind of gloss over the fact that he was ever here at all.
Most people want to forget about the defense that season, which is wild to think about what he's done in Kansas City.
Who are you rooting for?
Well, gee,
take away the Eagles part of it and just say, like, hey, as an NFL person who's just casually watching this, like, you can't pretend like I'm an Eagles fan.
That's hard to do. I mean, I can't.
Do you want the Eagles to win? Like, in your heart of hearts, do you want the Eagles to win?
Yes, definitely. I'm still heartbroken that they had the lead on the Chiefs 2 years ago and ended up coughing it up and giving the game away.
Yeah, we talked to Jason Fitz, and he made a good point, which is like, you have to be up by 2 touchdowns in the second half to feel like you're comfortable, the Chiefs.
Right?
Like, if you're not up by 2 scores going into the fourth quarter, you're done. Yeah, you better keep scoring, otherwise they're gonna come back and
Mahomes is that guy, that dude that I know he's gonna be the closer.
Yeah, as much as I hate to say it, and I don't like the Eagles, and they drive me nuts. I don't necessarily like Eagles fans. Hope there's not any around me. They're just the worst.
You're a Giants guy, so it makes total sense with the NFC East stuff.
It's not even that. It's just that Eagles fans are the worst.
Right.
Do you see all those videos of them like heckling Commanders fans going out of the game? There's that guy who lost his job because he was like dropping "See you next Tuesday."
Yeah, right.
Packers fan at the Eagles. Like it's just so easy to dislike.
No, I get it. The fan base of the Chiefs is a lot more personable, I'm sure.
No,
they might be annoying.
They're not either because they're spoiled.
Right, exactly.
They're in Patriots country now, right? They're where the Patriots were about 5 years ago, where they don't even understand what it's like.
But Eagle fans are definitely loud and brash.
Yeah, but I come to the conclusion of like, I don't want the 3-peat. I don't want to have to talk. It's the same reason I used to root against Tom Brady in every Super Bowl, because I wanted Tom Brady to have like the record for the most lost Super Bowls. He can have the most wins. I wanted to have the most lost Super Bowls. So I wanted to lose more Super Bowls than anyone in NFL history. And he was pretty close for a while there. And then the Seahawks decided to throw the ball, and then it all went away. And then the Falcons blew a 28-3 lead. Anyway, I just can't root for the Chiefs. I'm tired of it. I'm also tired of the ref stuff, the conversations about the officiating. And I think they have to lose a Super Bowl for that to stop talking.
Maybe the script writers will note that down and be like, we gotta throw them. They made it to the big game, but now we need them to lose, so they're not onto us anymore about the fix.
I'm just so tired of it. I want it to end. But that is where I am. Like, I'm rooting for Zack Baun. I'm not necessarily rooting for CJ so much. But I want to see Zach win. It is funny. Like, people are gonna try to spin Zack Baun's ascension this year into the biggest negative thing for the Saints. I can't bring myself to be angry, to be bitter about it, because
who are you getting rid of?
Who is he gonna like? How are you gonna get him on the field?
Right, exactly.
Right, like, he's not a will linebacker. You're not taking Pete Warner off. That's what I talked to Adam Gristic about. Like, it's like, well, for one thing, there's a lot of development going on in that linebacker room, right? Like, there's a reason that he showed up in Philadelphia ready to contribute. There's a reason Caden Ellis showed up in Atlanta ready to contribute, because they got developed here. So you kind of feel like, hey, we can continue to develop linebackers. Like, we
just don't want to be a farm team.
A huge issue. We don't want to be the farm team, but I think that's the issue you run into when a guy plays forever.
Right.
Like, this is DeMario's fault. People need to start blaming DeMario.
Damn you for being so reliable.
People need to start blaming DeMario for being eternal. That is his fault. If DeMario retired like a normal human being at age 33, Zack Baun is your starting in middle linebacker right now.
Right.
DeMario Davis is a vampire. And that's like, okay, they tried to re-sign Zack Baun. He was like, I want to go somewhere I'm going to play.
Yeah.
And if you're the Saints, you're like, yeah, well, we can't guarantee this guy playing
Yeah,
time.
we can put him on special team. That's about it.
Yeah, right. And, part of that's on DA. But again, it's like, it's that awkward thing where it's like you don't want to push your star veteran players out the door when they're still contributing. But like Bobby says this all the time, I'd rather be a year too early on a player than a year too late.
Sure.
And, I don't think that DeMario has fallen off a cliff, but I don't think the season you saw from DeMario this past year was his best either. Like, I think there are some diminishing returns, and now you have lost a potential replacement,
right?
And you don't have it. So you're probably going to go into this draft having to draft a linebacker the same way you drafted Zack Baun 5 years ago and be like, oh, DeMario's not going to play forever. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's disappointing because, now Zack Baun falls into the category of a Trey Hendrickson, the guy they let walk out the door.
See, I can't put him in the same category because Trey at least demonstrated ability.
We only saw a small amount of snaps out of
Part of that's because Zack never got on the field, but Zack also didn't play great when he got on the field. He never fit in that scheme, right? So even if you did keep him around, one of the reasons he fits so well in Philadelphia is Vic Fangio's scheme is basically built for him,
right?
And you need those two inside linebackers to play inside the outside linebackers. He and Nakobe Dean, what Nakobe Dean's done for the year, but they were just flying around all year, making all these tackles, and that's the exact scheme he should have been in all along. And the issue is, Saints shouldn't have drafted him at all.
Right. They're trying to put the, square peg in a round hole kind of thing.
Right. People are going to be like, well, if he had kept him around, he would have had that season in New Orleans. I don't think he would. I don't think he would have played as well as he is in Philadelphia in New Orleans for the same reason they should have never brought him in the first place, which is it's just not a scheme fit for him. But either way, Zack's one of the nicest people I've ever encountered. A lot of times, when you try to interview someone in the locker room and they're busy, they'll just big time you and be like, go away. I remember last year I went to go interview him just for like a pregame interview because I sent it in for the broadcast. And, I asked, hey, Zack, you mind if I talk to you for 30 seconds? It was before they went up to Green Bay. And he was like, oh, I got a meeting. I got to go take a shower. Can I do that and come back? And it was like, nine times out of 10, if someone says that to you, they're lying to you.
They're gone, right?
And they are not going to come back. He came running back out. All right, let's go. He just, I don't know. He's just a genuinely helpful, nice person.
Right.
So that's the type of person I root for. When
he doesn't fill in Philly then.
He's too good for Philly. They don't deserve that. Anyway, all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. I want to talk about Kellen Moore. I want to talk about some things involved with the coaching search. What are your opinions? What are your takes? This is Inside Black and Gold live from Radio Row. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold, coming at you from Radio Row, getting ready for Super Bowl 59 between the Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs.
Part two.
Yes. And one key piece of the Philadelphia Eagles is Kellen Moore, a coach that I'm sure will be getting a lot of interesting questions this week. We're recording this on Monday. Media night is later today. It's when everyone has to go out there. It's the I'm just here so I don't get fined part of the equation. And I'm fascinated because Kellen Moore, if this Super Bowl was in, I don't know, Vegas, Arizona, name a place, you could probably
anywhere but here.
You could probably avoid a lot of those questions. You might get a handful of them.
Sure, but local media definitely chomping at the bit.
What is the local media doing if not going and harassing Kellen Moore repeatedly?
No doubt.
We're going to do that. Everyone's going to do that. So it's just this really interesting week where the Saints can't talk to Kellen Moore, but he's going to be harassed nonstop about the Saints head coaching job. And I don't know. We talked about this on Friday on Sports Talk. I'm concerned. I'm not willing to put my stamp in Kellen Moore's going to be the head coach, because until there's pen to paper, I am in my heart of hearts convinced it's going to fall apart, because the Eagles have a week to, soften him up, and then throw a monster deal. Like, you will be the highest paid offense coordinator in the NFL.
Right.
And
Look what you did here in just 1 year.
Right. We're going to, and then next year when there's a better head coaching opportunity, there you go. And he's going to have to make that decision for himself. I'm hopeful that he takes the job, because the optics alone will be terrible.
For sure.
Especially, the new, back in the news today is the archdiocese scandal.
Yeah.
And how the Saints higher ups were working with the archdiocese to, I don't know the way you would phrase it, to help frame some media coverage around it. It's a really bad look. It's nothing that we didn't know from 5 years ago when that news first broke,
but just so happens to be coming back into light now.
It's a really, for the Saints, in terms of how they're trying to get through this week and hire a head coach, definitely not well timed for them. And I read the stories this morning. I used to work with Ramon Vargas, who was out front reporting those stories, and he's unimpeachable in my opinion. Like, I trust every ounce of his reporting, and that's something they're going to have to, like, I'm sure Kellen Moore.
Yeah, what the hell am I getting into?
Hey, how aware of that whole situation was he? And now, as you're considering whether to take a job, suddenly you're approached with this information.
Oh, I'm sure Eagles are going to him going, you want to go into this?
Yeah.
Throw it right in front of his face.
I don't know, man. Like, the one thing that's telling, in my opinion, of this whole situation is Darren Rizzi has the Broncos special teams coordinator job effectively sitting out there in front of him, waiting for him to take it, and he hasn't taken it yet. And why are you doing that if you're Darren Rizzi? There's only one reason. Because you think you still have a shot at this head coaching job.
Right. It's nothing is in pen and paper. Like you said, nothing's in stone right now.
Right. And as long as he feels like he still has a shot at that head coaching job, he's going to ride it out.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the scenario.
Because we do know there is someone that definitely wants this gig.
Darren will take that job, and Darren will treat it, Ralph Marlborough keeps comparing him to Ed Ogeron, and like everyone kind of said, like, oh, when the LSU hired Ed O, it was just a miss. They couldn't get any of their top candidates. Tom Herman, big time, who went to Texas.
Yeah.
And so he took that personally, right? The whole Michael Jordan thing.
Right.
So, and I feel like Darren's going to be the same way, and you're going to get kind of that lunatic energy. And I think that would be a good thing. And people are going to look at this and say, oh, you're just trying to cape for the team. Like, I've been saying, you can vouch for this. I have been saying since day one, it's like, they're not going to give him the job, but he'd probably do a good job with it if he did get it.
Right.
So I wouldn't jump off a cliff if it ended up being Darren, but from the perspective of how it would look for the team, for this whole head coaching
they're getting raked over as it is.
To come down to that, I don't know how you spin that in a way that isn't like, we need to make significant changes, sweeping changes.
Right.
And the question is, who survives? Now, a lot of that will go away if you start winning games, but if you don't, then it just gets louder and louder and louder. So it's kind of where we are. And I still think Kellen Moore is the Saints' top target. I just don't think that it's a done deal. I just can't bring myself to say it's a done deal.
There have been some reports, that have leaked out. Some reportedly hasn't been happy. Kellen Moore not happy with the situation of the QB room with the Saints. And I don't think that's any really big surprise to anybody, though.
No, and it's like, okay, what is he unhappy about, right? Like, is it Derek Carr? Is it the fact that there's really no quarterbacks to bring in? Like it can be a lot of different things. And the problem is, if it's not Derek Carr, then who is it, right? And what the thing that I keep coming back to, of like, if you're Kellen and you want to say like, well, this is an attractive situation for me, it's because one of the few positive things we can say about the Saints in terms of how they've managed is like, there's a really quick trigger in the NFL on head coaches not winning right away and getting fired. There's an insanely quick trigger. You look at Carolina, you look at, even like Bobby Slowick in Houston. Like, They were like, get him out of here. And it's like, this was the hot head candidate last year, right? I guarantee you, if Todd Bowles goes out there and, Grizzy or whatever his name is, like whatever his name is, if he shits the bed and is not a good offensive coordinator, I bet you money Todd Bowles is getting fired. Because I think Todd Bowles was supposed to be the sacrificial lamb, and he's been just good enough. Like, they don't want Todd Bowles as their head coach. They sent Todd Bowles in there as a lamb for slaughter, but he's happened to win a weak NFC South for a few years, and they can't get rid of him. If they go out there and go 5-12, he's fired. He's gone. They're not sticking with him. And like, I feel like that's just like the head coaching cycle in a nutshell. And one thing you can say, if you're going to be the Saints head coach and it does not look like it's going to be good for you in year one, you're going to get time. You're going to get multiple years.
Yeah. So,
if the situation is the quarterback and you can say, well, we're going to ride it out with Derek, we're going to ride it out with Spencer.
One last hoorah, right?
If it doesn't go well, you don't have to be looking over your shoulder. It's going to be okay. Let's improve. Let's fix it. Like Dan Campbell. Like if the Lions were, gonna hit the eject button on Dan Campbell after a 7-21 start as a head coach,
sure,
you would have never gotten to where you are now. And obviously now is like, well, who's our offensive coordinator? Who's our defensive coordinator?
Now we'll see. For Dan Campbell has another huge challenge now ahead of him. It's like you built this team up with your staff to get to this point, and now you've just been ripped apart. Can you do it again with a whole new staff?
Yeah, no, and that's the Eagles were managed to do that
right
effectively. So
for sure.
It's not unheard of.
Last year was a little shaky for them, but yeah, they were right back this season.
Well, last year was they fired everybody, right? They hired
right.
New offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. They're in the Super Bowl. So it can go. And the Lions certainly have the talent on offense. Like there's some questions about defense. Obviously, they need to get the guys healthy. But if I guess the funny thing is we went through all this, and the question has been, will Kellen Moore take the job? Is he a good candidate for the job?
Right.
And he was never at the top of my list. I understand why people are enamored with him right now. I think there's a little recency bias going on, but you're also talking about a guy who's 36 years old, but has had 6 years of offensive coordinator work under his belt.
That's wild.
Even like a guy like Sean Payton, I think he was like 41 when he was hired in 2006. Right. And he only had 3 seasons with the Giants as offensive coordinator. He went to Dallas as a quarterback's coach, and that's when he got hired. So like that's a significant amount of coordinator experience, of offensive or defensive coordinator experience to come in. So I don't think the issue is age, even though he's a younger guy, because he grew up with football. He played in a ton of college games at Boise State. He was a pro quarterback for 6 years. So he's been around the game his whole life.
And right after he stopped playing, boom, he was the QB coach in Dallas.
Yeah, and you listen to what like Dak Prescott and some of these guys had to say about him, who is kind of unique because he was a former teammate. They played together, and then suddenly he was coach. And that's all positive. But that's the offensive side of the ball. That's the whole equation that I know. I think if he was getting hired as the offensive coordinator, I wouldn't have a qualm about it. I'd be like 100%.
Sure.
It's the head coach part of it that I'm a little more skeptical about. But at the end of the day, who's left? Who are your options? And if it comes down to, hey, we could either get Kellen, who is kind of the guy that everyone says we should want, or Rizzi, the guy who would feel like a safety school hire. I think
you settled.
Yeah, you settled. And I don't. And
that's not fair for Riz, unfortunately.
It's not fair to Riz, but it's a consequence of dealing with Dennis Allen the last 3 years, which is basically the same scenario, right? Where everyone was like, they kind of just settled for Dennis Allen. He was here, he was in the room already. Continuity. And no one's begging for continuity right now. Everyone's begging for the opposite. And whether people want to admit it or not, they were not yelling, everything needs to change in 2022. They weren't. They were like, no, I think we have a piece, we have a group here that can win. And let's let Dennis lead it. It fell apart pretty quickly.
He's like, yeah, he shut out Tom Brady in the Bucs. Let's give him a run.
Yeah, and like that's my big what if. Is like, what if in 22?
No, that's a great point. I like it.
You had dropped a bag on Dennis Allen's head and say, we will make you the highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL, but we're going to give Darren Rizzi the head coach job. And how would that have gone? I think it would have.
What if?
I don't think you would have been in the Super Bowl, but I do think you would have had a lot more success. And I don't think players would have revolted the way they did. Alvin Kamara wants Darren Rizzi. He's tweeting yawn emojis.
We've seen, two of the big leaders on this team in an Alvin Kamara and a Cam Jordan in support of the Riz.
Yep. And there's others too. I mean, those are the two vocal ones.
Right, yeah.
If you go around that locker room and you talk to players, a lot of them say, I think Riz is head coach. When players say a guy's head coach material, that means he could be the head coach of this team. That's what they're saying. And I heard that from at least 5-6 different players who've used it.
That to me makes sense, though. What else are they going to say, really?
I don't know. I don't think they would say that about Dennis Allen right now.
Right. Some of them, they'd be saying, I'm looking forward to some change.
Yeah. And I guess, it is what it is. We'll find out in a week. It's the phrasing they used in the reports is that they're going to meet again after the Super Bowl, not that like they're going to hire him after the Super Bowl.
Right.
So I don't know if it's going to be immediate or if it's going to take time. There's been reports that, he's been talking to potential staff members or at least coming up with a short list.
Sure.
And that's helpful. That's telling that it is at least like a high on Kellen Moore's radar. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
With the Eagles practicing at the facility, hopefully they make the offices and practice area, very appealing, at least to him.
I hope they dress it up real nice.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, give him some warm fuzzies to go home with or not go home with.
This could be my office.
Yeah, to stay here. But we'll find out. Either way, it's going to be a busy week. We're going to have a lot of interviews, talk to some Saints players, talk to several other people tonight at the media event.
Yeah, you and the Cajun Cannon going through that. You're gonna have a hoot with him.
Yeah, Vic Fangio. They know each other well, so
right. Don't patrol days.
I'm sure that's gonna come up some walks down memory lane. But until then, we're gonna have a few more episodes throughout the week. We're gonna cut this one off. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We're gonna be sitting here, table 19, Radio Row, for the next week. It's gonna be a good time. Who dat?
Who dat, folks? See you soon.